What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the Super Smash Brothers and Platform Fighter tutorial series, we are going to be going over taunting. So taunts are fun things to do, just when you want to show your dominance over an opponent, or if you want them to be baited into performing an attack or action that they shouldn't do. They also can have some other benefits. You can have hitboxes, you can actually deal damage, and sometimes they will give you buffs and things if you complete them. So they have a lot of uses. In my case, when I press this button, I want to perform a taunt. You can see the character named Shawnthebro does a little animation. And right now that is actually all that happens, but we will have a lot of freedom with this. We just want to make sure we are able to taunt on a button press or on a command. And once we can do that, we'll make sure that all of the characters can do it, which you can see they're all doing it now. And once they can do their taunt, we will be good to go and explore further with what we can accomplish when using this taunt. Before we hop into this episode, if you want to get caught up in this entire series and see how we've done all of these cool mechanics such as launching our opponents and attacking them, picking up weapons, spawning weapons in the world, all these other cool things, you can click this link right here in the top right corner. It'll lead you to the playlist where you can check out everything that we have to offer in the Super Smash Brothers and Platform Fighter tutorial series. Now this is a code and blueprint tutorial series, so we're going to be doing a little bit in both. The first thing I actually want to do is go to Edit Project Settings, and I want to go to Input, and I want to make a new action mapping. Now this is not using enhanced input, but if you are using enhanced input, this will still work the same way. You'll just have to create your action mapping differently to support the enhanced input style. I do have videos on that if you'd like to see. I can link one up here in the top right corner, but for now I'm just using a regular action mapping. And so I've made 4 action mappings because in my game I have 4 characters that can play on one input device such as the keyboard. So I have Taunt, Taunt P2, Taunt P3, and Taunt P4. After you press the plus to add the action mapping, you can give them their names and then select the input that you want. For me, I use num0, num4, num5, and num6 for the characters respectively. And those are my taunt actions. Now that I've set up my action mapping to capture the taunt, I can go ahead into my code and go to my SSB template character CPP and SSB template character.h. Let's start in the SSB template character.h file. In the .h file, we have the eCharacter state enum, which tracks what the character is currently doing. So it's things like moving, jumping, blocking. And in the previous episode, we added recovery. In this episode, I want to add the taunting character state. So e_taunting was a display name of taunting. Remember that the umeta display name just determines what this will show up as in the blueprint and when using enums and data tables and things like that. So after we've created this taunting enum, we can set the character to be in that state once we trigger the taunt, and then we'll do other logic from there. After that has been added to the eCharacter state enum, we can go back to the SSB template character.cpp file, and we can scroll down to our function where we bind our action mappings to our functions. That is the setup player input component function, and when we are in here you can see we have bound all of our functions to these action and axis mappings such as the jump, the crouch, our attacks, the grab. We want to make sure we do one for block as well. And to do this we are going to need to call player input component, bind action. We're going to pass it the name of the action mapping we want to bind. That is going to be the name of our taunt action mapping that we just made in the project settings. You don't have to worry about player 2, player 3, player 4. That is a keyboard mode hack that we have in this series. So if you're playing with 4 controllers, all 4 of them will be able to bind to this taunt action, and it will only correspond to the button on their controller, which is what we want. The other parameters are the pressed or released. So when do we want to trigger it? When we press this button or when we release it? So when we press the taunt button, we want to trigger the taunt function. So IE_pressed. This is the object that we're calling this function on, and we want to call it on the character that we're in. So this represents this class, this object really that we're in. Then we need the function that we want to call. Let's go and make a function that we can call when we press the taunt button. So going back to the SSB template character.h, we can scroll down to where our functions are. And here are mine, and I've made a new function called start taunt. I made it a U function that is blueprint callable, so we can call it from the blueprint. This will be useful for our keyboard mode hack that we need to implement to trigger the taunt for the other players when on one input device. Again, that is void start taunt. we want to assign the start taunt function that we just made to this binding, and the way you do that is ampersand, the name of the class, : start taunt. And the reason for this is because you could actually use a different class in here, but we want to call the function on the class that we're in, and that's how you can do it. So now when we press that input that we have mapped to the taunt action mapping, we will call the start taunt function. At this point, we want to go and make our start taunt function. So I'm going to scroll down. And here's my start taunt function. It is incredibly simple. We have void ASSB template character, : start taunt. And I set the character state to be e character state : e_ taunting. When we trigger the taunt, set the character state to be taunting. Now there are a few things you may want to do here. It is really up to you. So you can say if the character state is not equal to, and you could block some of these states from going to taunting. So for me, for example, I don't want to be able to taunt if I am dead or respawning. The character state dead. And character state not equal to e character state respawning. You may want to block jump and recovery as well, or you could leave them in, and when the character hits the ground, they will begin their taunt as soon as they hit the ground. You could also taunt in the air if you have an air taunt, so it could actually be useful for you to be able to taunt in those places, but I definitely don't want to be able to taunt if I'm dead or respawning, so I'm going to block those two for myself. There are also things we don't want to do while we're taunting. So let's scroll up and go through our function list really quickly. Toward the top of our functions, we have one called move right. And in move right, it determines if we're moving left, right, or if we're just standing still. In this function, I was checking for some things like if we are able to move, if we're not in the blocking state, and we're not stunned in the stun state. I also want to make sure that we are not taunting. I don't want to be able to move while we're taunting. You may have taunts that you want to be able to walk or move during. In this case, I'm just blocking them all right now, but if you want to leave that open so that you can move during taunts, that is fine. You may want to block characters from doing certain actions, such as this, when taunting. It is up to you, but just be aware of that. And then move right controller, which I have as a separate function. This does mainly the same logic with just a few minor differences for controllers, and I have also added the character state not equal to e character state e_ taunting in here too. So whether you're on keyboard or controller, we're not allowing the character to move if they're in the taunting state. Scrolling down past the move right controller, we have start jump. In your start jump or stop jump functions, you could add a check to make sure that the character state is not equal to taunting if you don't want them to be able to cancel out of the taunt to go into the jump. I think that's fine. I think canceling the taunt in general is typically okay, but there are plenty of games where you can't cancel the taunt, and instead you just get punished. So you could add the check right in here in this if statement. Same with stop jump, same with start crouch, same with stop crouch, same with your basic attack, same with your special attack, same with your recovery, perform recovery, same with your grab, same with your start blocking, same with your stop blocking. You don't need to add it to itself because in this case we can't cancel our taunt to go into another taunt, so it's perfectly fine to leave it as is, although I did realize I'm going to add an if can move in here. That way we can't start a taunt during the entrance sequence. So start taunt now has can move in this if statement. Take damage is fine, handle launch is fine, lose life is fine, respawn is fine, exit revival platform is fine, break block shield, and tick are fine. So all those places I mentioned, if you want, you can feel free to block the characters from going into them if they're taunting. That way they can get punished while in their taunt. At this point we are ready to open up the editor, so let's go ahead and do so. Now the editor is back open. The next thing we want to do is add an animation for the taunt. So I'm going to go to my animations, my animation blueprint for my character, and open that up. Once I'm in here, I want to add a new state for my taunt. Now for me, it's very, very simple what I can do, but you might want to have a few more transitions to what can lead to the taunt or what the taunt can lead to. So for me, I made a new state that I called Taunt. I put him right here with no state events at all. Then if I go into this state, I have a default character taunt animation. And this is the animation you saw playing during the demo. Doesn't have any anim notifies or anything like that. It's just a basic animation. Now in the NMBP for this state, I click on the animation and I make sure it is not set to loop the animation. We only want it to play once, then we want to return to idle. Now I can go from idle to taunt, as I said. So I drag from idle to the taunt state and I'll get this transition rule. This transition rule is literally just checking to see if the character state is taunting on this character. So to make it, we just grab our character reference, which is the owner of this animation blueprint, drag off of this and grab our character state variable, and then check if it's equal enum, the value that we want, which is the taunting enum. Then we drag that into the result, can enter transition. And once you do that, if you are in the idle animation state and your character state is taunting, you'll go from idle to taunt. I have no transition events on here, so this is very simple. Now taunt can also go back to idle, so the other way, and the transition rule on this one is automatic rule based on sequence player in state. So make sure this is checked, and basically what this means is once the animation is finished, if it has no other states to go to, it will take this transition. So we'll go from taunt back to idle. Now there is a transition rule in this one that I created called exit taunt. So when we start transitioning from taunt to idle, I've written in exit taunt here as the custom blueprint event. And basically once you type something in here, it will give you an event that you can use in the event graph. So starting the transition will trigger this event, and then if we go into the event graph, we can search for that new event that we created. So you can type anim notify and then the name of the event, exit taunt. And we want to make sure we grab the one that says event here, because we're not trying to call it, we're trying to handle the behavior once it is called. And all I'm doing at this point is resetting the character state back to idle. The only reason I'm doing this is because I don't want to continuously loop from idle to taunt, taunt to idle. So we have to reset the taunt at some point, and I want to reset it based on when the animation finishes. So this is animation dependent. But once the animation finishes, we can grab our character reference that we have, and we can set the character state variable on it. And we can set this to idle. So we'll just reset the character state back to the default once the taunt has completed. At this point, your character will be able to taunt, but if you're on a keyboard or if you have multiple players on one input device, we need to use that keyboard mode hack. And to do that, we can go into our character blueprint. So I'm going to my base character BP, and I'm going to look at where I have all my other ones for player 2, 3, and 4. So these are all my input actions for multiple players on one input device, and typically I just grab the corresponding character and then call the function based on the input that they pressed. Here is no different. So I can search for my input actions that I made for the specific players. So taunt P2, for example, and I'll get this input action right here. I've already done this. And when it is pressed, I want to check and see if the player 2 reference is valid. So after I get my player 2 reference, I can right click on it and convert it to a validated get. And then I can drag off that player 2 reference and call start taunt, which will allow me to perform a taunt on the player 2 assigned to this input device. And the same goes for taunt P3, just using the player 3 reference instead, and taunt P4 using the player 4 reference instead. And after that, all of our characters will be able to perform the start taunt regardless of the device that they're on. And you'll see that if I press my buttons to taunt, each of my characters should perform the taunt. And they do. So we know we are good to go. Now before we wrap this episode up, I want to show you guys something I've been working on that's really exciting, and that is our merch. So we've added merch to the store. You might have noticed it in the little section below your video where it's showing off all the different products. If you like what you see, go ahead and check out the store right there. Anything you purchase from that store will directly benefit the channel. Additionally, if you would like to support the channel and gain some benefits while you're at it, you can check out the Patreon, the YouTube membership, or the server subscriptions through Discord. All of those 3 methods will get you the same benefits, and some of those benefits include getting the templates for free once they are released on the Epic Marketplace. Feel free to check them out. I'll add a link to the top right corner right here to the Patreon. If you click it, you can check out all the benefits, see what you can get, see if it's something that interests you. Also, guys, if you had any trouble with this episode or any issues that you ran into, feel free to contact me on Discord. Be happy to help you. There's a server link in the description. And that is all I got, guys. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.